Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser, and you can find me pretty much everywhere: YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all the places at Hawk Blogger. Also, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all those places as well. Always appreciate a review, 5-star review, please. If you're going to give less, let me know why before you do. And I was bummed last night. Could not do a Mariners post game after what was a fantastic Game 2 victory for the Mariners. And there's been one guy that I've been really eager to catch up with. It's been a while. The real OGs of Hawk Blogger Mornings know that this man was, I believe, my second guest. If not my second, he was my third guest on Hawk Blogger Mornings. Jason Churchill, Prospect Insider, my go-to for all things Mariners. And man, Jason, how times have changed, dude. How are you doing?
I'm good. You mentioned times changing, like the vibes, right? Like the vibe. I'm still seeing I don't know if you're getting any of this or you're feeling any of this as somebody who's kind of grown up here, but like you almost don't want to be too excited about it. That's what I'm getting from a lot of folks. I don't want to be too excited. I don't want to be too overconfident, which I understand. And then you see a lot of the social posts. It's like, well, this is the Mariners. There's still a chance, the Mariners blow something. And there absolutely is. It's only a 2-0 lead, but the vibes are really, really good right now, which is a lot of fun.
They are. And you know what? Like, I get it. I think every single Mariners fan, when they were up 10-3 in the 9th inning, were like, uh-oh, come on, you got to throw strikes, dude. Like this could go the wrong way. We've lived through the Royals, comebacks. We've lived through the Indians back when the Indians comeback. We've seen all sorts of things go wrong. And so I think that's pretty normal to feel that way. At the same time, if you just sit back and you look at these two teams, I don't think the Blue Jays offense has shown up yet, and I think they'll make an appearance. But that pitching staff for the Blue Jays, I don't think that's an ALCS winning pitching staff, dude.
Yeah, it certainly doesn't look like it right now. They really needed Savage to give them, something significant, and he didn't. Unfortunately, didn't have his splitter. But heading into the series, and it was almost the same. It's almost just this is what you do in the postseason. If you can match the other team starter, or when you have a clear advantage, get to the 5th or 6th inning with an advantage on the scoreboard because George Kirby was better than Gossman or whatever it is. Bryce Miller was better than Flaherty, or depending on the matchup. If you can do that, if you're Seattle built the way they are, if you can do that, you're going to win a lot of games. And that's essentially what's happened at this point. And what's really fun about this Blue Jays Mariners matchup is it's strength versus strength. Like Seattle pitchers want to strike guys out. Toronto doesn't strike out less than any team in baseball. Like kind of the new Astros when it comes to that. And they're the 4th best offense in the league this year. They just put the ball and play a lot. They had a lot of line drives. They're without Bo Bichette right now, which certainly doesn't help. But I mean, they've been shut down 5 runs in 2 games. That's not how they win baseball games. They win games 6-3, 7-4, things of that nature. And when you get to the 6th or 7th inning, if you're Seattle and you're up 3-1, you're feeling pretty good. You like it to be 5-1. You'd rather the 10-3 sort of situation.
Yeah.
But you have to feel really good about that. It was really always about just at least matching their first 2 games when you might have a disadvantage, on the mound to start the game. Just match what they have going on. You have an advantage the rest of the way. And that's how those 2 games turned out. They did it. They execute. I've been driving that word, Brian, execution.
Oh, you sound like Mike McDonald.
Yeah, like talent for talent. Like, any of these teams that were in the postseason could beat the other team. Detroit could beat Seattle. Detroit could beat New York. Detroit could beat Toronto. You can go to the National League. Seattle can beat LA. Seattle can beat the Brewers. Who executes the best? And so far, it's been Seattle.
Yeah, and I'm curious, going into this series, I kind of felt like it was a 3-game series and a 4-game series. Like the first 3 games, and even really the first 2, just to get the Mariners, rotation set again before the off day. You're just hoping to get one of those games if you can find a way. And you didn't know how the pitching was going to go. You didn't know how the bullpen was going to go. You didn't know how the offense would respond. And the thing that kind of surprised me the most was how the Blue Jays started strong kind of in both games and then just disappeared. Like, it's one thing to like have it kind of settle in, but they had 1 hit after, like, from the bullpen. The bullpen's only given up 1 hit against the Blue Jays. what's going on? George Springer seems like the poster child of this. He looks like Babe Ruth in his first at bat, and then it's like, okay, I'm just going to get out every time after that.
Yeah, it's been strange. And it's like what I was just saying before. They put the ball in play. Seattle goes for the strikeout. There haven't been a ton of strikeouts of Blue Jays play. There's been a few,
Right?
not a ton. They're still putting the ball in play. A lot of balls on the ground, which isn't all that uncommon for the Blue Jays. And a lot of times those are just going to be singles or outs. So if you're the Mariners and they're going to hit the ball hard, and the Blue Jays have hit the ball hard, you're going to have those line outs where you're like, "Whoo, man, he just missed that." There was a little bit of luck there. You're going to have that against the Blue Jays because they hit so many line drives. But they're getting a lot of ground ball outs, not a lot of double plays, but just a lot of grounder to third, grounder to short, grounder to second. Blue Jays are just off. You're right, though. They're going to get that going a little bit at some point, you would think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's so big about Seattle, just being able to, even if it's 4-4, even if you don't go, donuts, goose eggs for 5 innings with your starter or 6 innings with your starter and match the Blue Jays starter, even if it's 4-4, every inning the Blue Jays are not ahead, as late in the game as you get, advantage Seattle. And that was the same thing in Detroit. I don't know if that's going to be the same against the Milwaukee or the Dodgers if they get that far, but it's certainly true with the Blue Jays. You have a distinct advantage middle relief wise with the step up of Edward Bazardo in particular.
Oh my God.
And the availability of one of your starters somewhere along the way coming in and pitching somewhere in the middle or late in the game. That's the big advantage for Seattle. If you get a lead late, I mean, if you're Toronto, you can't have that. You can't be down 6-5 even in the 8th inning. That is not where you feel comfortable.
I was so curious. I have so many questions for you. We're talking to Jason Churchill, a Prospect Insider. Make sure you check him out and all his stuff. Amazing stuff over at Prospect Insider. What do you think is going to happen with Brian Wu? Do you think, and what do you think is going to happen with Bryce Miller? Is Bryce Miller going to be the next guy out of the bullpen out of the starter group?
I think those two things are married together a little bit. When you look at this, it looks like Kirby and Castillo are set up to go game 3 and 4. That's been announced. That's been made official. It sounds like the Mariners are thinking about Brian Wu for game 5. They really haven't been specific with that, though. Does that mean he starts? And, I've heard this 50 pitch, rumor. Does that mean he starts and goes maybe 3, gets into the 4th, and then you bring in Bryce Miller? Or do you bring in Miller to start the game and then go to I'm a big proponent of let's go to the guy who can get us the furthest. So if Miller's there and he can go 80 or 90, let's have him go as long as you want. And then you bring in Wu and he can pitch an inning or 2 or 3 or whatever it is. And hopefully that sets him up to make a start somewhere down the road. Probably wouldn't be in this series if he appears in game 5. But I think those two things are absolutely married together. You can go Miller, Wu, Miller in that game again to get you through 6. And that's if that game occurs at this point. Like, I did not think we were talking about this.
Yeah.
Like, I've had people say, "Oh, the Jays are going to sweep the Mariners," and I've had people say, "Nah, the Mariners are going to sweep the Jays." Like, you guys are crazy, but here we are, heading home. Seattle heads home, and they're up 2-0. So there's certainly no guarantee of that game 5.
Yeah, I'm interested in your thought process there. So, I would think the strategic conversation would be, well, do you want to start with your best chance to stay in the game and limit runs? And that might be Brian Wu. Or do you want to get the guy who has the potential to go the deepest into the game if he's pitching well? Do you really want to have Brian Wu come in if Bryce Miller does have a bad start and he's down 3-0? Is it a waste of Brian Wu at that point to have him as a relief? So I'm kind of curious, like, how do you come to that conclusion about the longer start is the better way?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that go with that. One, what's the series? Are we 2-2 or are we 3-1? If you get to game 5, one of those two things is true. 2-2 is a little different story than 3-1. So you might make a different decision based on where you are in the series. The other thing is, where do the Mariners think Brian Wu is? Like, if you're only really thinking 50 pitches, that doesn't necessarily mean you don't think he can be really, really good for 50 pitches. But where do you think he really is? And that's the version of Brian Wu you're comparing to the current version of Bryce Miller, not the regular season version of Brian Wu necessarily. So that's how you think about that. And obviously the team knows a lot more about that than we do. Because if it was regular season Brian Wu, even for 50 pitches, you're going to want to make sure he faces like the top 4 guys in the order twice, right? That's the goal, is to get him to face him twice. So maybe that's when, if you start with Miller, maybe that's when you bring Wu in, when they turn the lineup over, they get to Springer at the top, and you're like, all right, Wu's going to face these guys, and hopefully he can get to them twice in his 50 pitches. So you could go either way, and I think and make that work and make it make sense. I look a lot, Brian, for these things that are like, okay, is there a way to explain this decision where it doesn't drill into my brain? Like, come on, like,
Yeah.
I look for that. It's
Yeah.
really that. Come on, like, what are we doing here? Like the constant pinch hitting, even in the fourth inning, you're taking out Canzone in the fourth. It's been driving me crazy. But
Yeah.
a situation like that, like, man, you could really go either way. Just like starting Logan Gilbert in game 2, like there was a lot of momentum, in that conversation for Luis Castillo. He was
Right.
rested, certainly more rested. But then you get the part where Luis Castillo has struggled mightily on the road. He's a number 5 starter on the road this year, where he's more like a 2 or a 3 at home, or even better. So they kind of got the best of both worlds when you look at the results, in game 2 on Monday. But like, I think I probably would have said, "Hey, Luis, let's do this," and saved Logan Gilbert for a game 3 and made sure he was all rested up. But, you win the game, it was the right decision. That's kind of the rule, isn't it?
That is the way the world works. It's results based. And, I mean, Logan definitely did not look like he was himself. He
It
hasn't
was a
had
lot
great.
to ask, wasn't it?
It was,
Wasn't that a
it
lot
was
to
a
ask
lot
of
to
him? Yeah.
ask. It had not been a situation. He has not pitched great against Toronto in general. So there's that. But he also just was not executing his pitches, to use your word, right? And so to get out of that game, that looked like it was going to go really wrong, with a win and 2-0, you look at these next 2 matchups, and the Tigers confirmed Scherzer is going to go game 4. You've got Bieber tomorrow in game 3. And it's hard as a Mariners fan not to be like, those guys are not going to do it. And your bullpen has definitely not done it. On the flip side, George Kirby hasn't necessarily silenced the Toronto bats very often when he's faced them. So, what's your take on these matchups that are coming up the next 2 days?
I think it's a relatively even matchup, Kirby to Bieber. And it's not really because Bieber's facing the Mariners. It's at T-Mobile Park. Kirby's facing the Blue Jays. Kirby's been pretty good of late. And pitching, at T-Mobile Park is a pretty big advantage for him too. But it is for the Blue Jays as well. I mean, that ballpark is a lot more forgiving than Toronto's about a neutral ballpark, and we know T-Mobile is the most difficult ballpark in which to score runs in all of baseball. But I think Bieber's a good matchup. That's if you're Toronto, you feel good about that game. The whole Max Scherzer thing in game 4, like what happens if they're down 3-0, Brian? You really think they're going to go with Scherzer? Or you think they're going to go Gossman on 3 days rest and say, hey, get us as far as you can, and we'll go from there? Because it comes back to the same thing, the Wu Miller conversation. Who has the best chance of getting us through even 3 or 4 with the score tied or with the lead? And that's not going to, the answer to that question is never going to be Max Scherzer at this point in his career. So keep an eye on that one. If it goes 3-0, you might see Gausman in game 4 for Toronto.
Well, that's interesting. It makes sense. And if it's 3-0, even if they go Gossman, and even if they get that game, their next pitcher, you think they go back to Savage?
Probably. Yeah, probably. You go game 4, game 5, probably go back to Savage, but it's all hands on deck after it gets 3-0. It does not matter. You're not saving anybody for anything.
Right.
And I think it's the same for Seattle. You get to 3-0, I think you're, to the wall, trying to close it out. You don't want it to, even though there's a break, it's not about, hey, that next series. It's about, if we get the opportunity to get this done, everybody is available. Anybody that can face even one hitter is available. So it'll probably just be, if you're in game 4 or game 5 with the chance to close it out, the previous day's starting pitcher is probably the only guy unavailable entirely.
We are talking to Jason Churchill of Prospect Insider, and Jason, talking about the Blue Jays starter from yesterday, the young kid who's barely made any starts in Major League Baseball, could have been drafted by the Mariners. I have to go back. I mean, you being Prospect Insider, when the Mariners are sitting there on the board and had some choices of who to draft, they considered drafting this kid. What was your take then, and what's your take now on who they took versus who they could have taken?
Yeah, there were 3, 4, 5 guys on the board that made a lot of sense at that point, including Saincha and Trey Savage, and they obviously went with Jurangelo Saincha. For me, the medical part of it probably pushed Seattle off at Savage, and he's obviously been fine at this point, but medical histories are a big deal at the draft. But if you pick 4, 5, 6 picks later, that medical issue, that medical concern is just a little bit lesser of a thing for you, right? Because the money's going to be a little bit lower. You're picking lower in the draft. You get an opportunity to get a guy who could pitch at the front of your rotation. Maybe it's more, valuable to take that risk. You're more willing to take. I always talk, Brian, every move you make a DFA, a draft pick, a trade. Everything's a wager. It's a bet because you don't know anything. We don't know anything, right? We don't know what's going to happen in game 3 at all. Kirby's going out there. The Mariners are betting on Kirby. Is it a good bet? It's a good bet. Does it work out? We'll have to wait and see. We just nothing is 100%. We don't know anything. We don't know if Bryce Harper's going to be good next year. Like we legitimately don't know that. So when you think about it that way, and it's magnified when it's a kid who's never played in pro ball, right? And you get past like the halfway point of the draft or down toward the halfway point, and it's sometimes just the littlest things that make the difference. And I think what happened there was just Seattle was like, let's not mess with the medical thing. Let's take the guy who's the better athlete. Let's take the guy who has a chance at least to give us value with both hands. I don't know how much that's going to work out, but I think at some point early in his career, we're going to see Saincha in a Mariners uniform, most likely, switch around and throw from the left side in the middle of a game, which is going to be interesting. And people are going to love seeing that because it's very strange. We just don't get an opportunity to see stuff like that. If as a right-handed pitcher, I'm getting this question a lot. Why didn't they take Savage? Should they have taken Savage? And I think developmentally, Saincha matches up a little better with what Seattle's good at, and I think Savage matches up a little bit better with what the Blue Jays, do well. But if Saincha was just pitching right-handed and just starting this whole time, he'd probably be available to the Seattle Mariners at this postseason as well. Like if that's what you're looking to do, Cade Anderson, the number 3 pick in July. I mean, most people, I'm sitting here thinking, I don't know how long AA is going to be able to hold him. And with pitchers, once you get past that AA point, it's really all about workload, So you're going to think you get in the playoffs next year, Cade Anderson probably chance to be a part of it, just like Savage was this year for the Blue Jays. So for me, it was just when you look at that part of it, why is Savage already here? Why is he outperformed Saincha? A lot of that is just about who they are and what they bring to the table and how long that was going to take to develop. And Seattle's let the switch pitching thing, kind of go and happen and see what develops there. Savage did develop that splitter into a big time swing and miss pitch, and that's the one thing right now, at least, that Saincha doesn't have. But I don't think there was any sort of mistake there taking Saincha over Savage for Seattle.
Yeah, and I gotta admit, I mean, it's hard. I have not seen a lot of Savage pitch, but based on what I had seen and the number you put up, I expected top shelf stuff like that was just overpowering, even if it was only going to be for 3, 4, 5 innings. 95, like that I know he's got that splitter is like crazy, right? It's an amazing pitch,
and we didn't see the good one. I think that's the thing. You go back, you watch the highlights of that Yankees start that he had. Like that's kind of top shelf Savage, and we did not see that yesterday. We did not see that in game 2 for them. But his fastball is relatively straight, other than the fact that he releases so high,
right?
Such a high release, 6'4", 225. He's got such long levers, releases really high. It's a high slot too. It's so much closer to 1 o'clock than you'll see in most guys. Most guys are out near 2 o'clock. Some guys even lower than that. That's what makes it tough. You're seeing something very unique, but that fastball otherwise is pretty straight and hittable.
Yeah.
So it's like he's got to have slider and splitter, or he ends up being kind of a 1.5 pitch guy. And that's what happened yesterday. That's what happened in game 2. He was kind of a 1.5 pitch guy. And one of those pitches, the pitch that he could throw for a strike the most, is pretty hittable. It's pretty straight. They picked up the fastball pretty good, and he tried to stay away from it.
Yeah, that was kind of I guess I had expected him to be a high 90s kind of guy, and he's not.
Occasionally he might end up there, but yeah, mostly 93, 97.
And then the reason I'm kind of harping on this is it could come back up in this series. And the other thing is their 2 best starters specialize in the splitter. Mariners hit the splitter pretty well, especially Julio and Cal, and that actually showed up in both games.
Yeah, I thought the Cal home run in game 1 wasn't talked about enough after the game. I think people were just elated that they won the game and talking about the pitching performance from Bryce Miller, which was obviously, pretty huge, especially what he's been through in 2025. But the Cal home run was the absolute turning point in that game. And you might be able to say at this point, maybe the series, tying the game and ultimately getting Gossman out of there, tied at 1. And getting into their bullpen. I mean, you always want to get into the other team's bullpen, for the most part, unless you're going straight from starter to like one of their 2 aces in the pen. You want to get, if you're the Toronto, you want to get to Bazardo. You want to get to Caleb Ferguson or whoever that 5th guy is, right? Yeah. Anybody that might struggle throwing strikes or has hittable stuff, you don't want to go to Brash or Munoz, really. And despite his struggles recently, if you're a left-handed hitter, you really don't want to face Gabe Spire, in the seventh inning. You want to get to the Bazardos and the Fergusons and Luke Jacksons and Emerson, Hancocks and whoever else is there. That's what makes the postseason so interesting and an advantage that when their starters are fully healthy, and we even saw it in the 5-game series in Detroit, even when Wu was unavailable, having Luis Castillo and Logan Gilbert available to pitch out of the bullpen in that Friday night game 5 was the difference in the game, because they're better than Jack Flaherty and anything else Detroit had to offer back there. Not as deep. And the same is true with for Toronto. And you know what? If you want to look ahead. The Brewers don't have a great bullpen. They don't have a great bullpen. The Dodgers don't have a great bullpen. So the formula is always going to be the same.
Interesting. Well, I'm going to ask you a little bit about those guys, not looking ahead too much, but I'm curious your thoughts on who's the better matchup there and why. But I'm going to ask you something that nobody else is going to be talking about right now. And there's probably going to be people pissed at me for even bringing it up, Jason, but I can't help myself. I'm looking at this big picture wise. I always go big picture, and I'm like super excited. Doesn't matter. I'm not superstitious about this. Like, the Mariners are going to do whatever they're going to do this year. I look at JP Crawford and I'm like, I can't wait to have Colt Emerson at shortstop, like, just defensively. I'm kind of done watching JP Crawford, although he had a great defensive play yesterday on that pick. Is this the best version of this Mariner team, or do you think that the guys that they've got coming up in the minors, that there's a chance that the Mariners, not only with the guys coming up, but further development of Julio, Cal knowing the strike zone better, being more like, I don't know that Cal's going to hit 60 home runs every year, but I'm just talking about development as players. Is this the best version of the Mariners?
Yeah, no, it's not. There's no question. And it certainly sounds like Josh Naylor's liking it here. And if the Mariners get an opportunity to keep him, you start next season with Naylor on your club instead of going the majority of the season without him and, kind of playing ping pong over there at first base and just, a little Luke Raley, a little Rowdy Tellez, and, it bounced around, a little Donovan Solano. And it's like, and it wasn't as bad as some people think, but having Naylor there, even though he struggles against lefties, it's changed that lineup. Starting the season like that is going to be better. So it's not just the young players that are already on the club getting better, and it's not just the players that might come up and help you from the minors, like Colt Emerson, for example, Cole Young, players like that. It's having the opportunity with the payroll where it's at. I mean, it's up 15, 20 million since the season started. So if you start, I kind of have this theory, if you end the season at 165, which is about where Seattle is now, that's about the bottom of what I expect for next year. I expect them to start 2026 with at least a 165, and it could get to 170, 175. So it gives them an opportunity. It's not necessarily about free agents, but that gives them an opportunity to go out and be creative and do some things and start next season. Ignore the farm system altogether, just to put a complete team together to start the season, because they weren't there this year. And we saw what happens when you have that many holes in the lineup, lots of up and downs. You win 5 in a row, and all of a sudden you've lost 7 of 10, and you win 13 of 20, and it's like they can't win a game for 2 weeks, and you get swept by the Blue Jays at home. I'm sure that's what the Blue Jays are talking about now. We kicked these guys' tails in their own ballpark, and the Mariners are over there going, no, you didn't. Like, this wasn't us. It wasn't the same team. It was way back in May. So they have a really good opportunity. Farm system, where that roster is right now, where the payroll is right now, opportunities to go out and make deals, to sign free agents, and use their farm system to their advantage, to be markedly better in 2026 than they were this year. And even moving forward into 2027, you think about a kid like Emerson, if he comes up sometime next year, like, you're not necessarily going to get the best of him, right, in 2026. You might get the best of him in 27 and 28, and Julio in 2 years will be 26 years old. I mean, palms up, man. This team's just getting better. And, at some point they're probably going to have to start re-signing and extending the Logan Gilberts and the George Kirbys of the world. But you also have Saincha and Cade Anderson on the way. So you're going to have flexibility there too. Don't be surprised if one of the starting pitchers gets traded between now and the start of next season.
What do you think happens with Skubal? Like, where does he end up next year?
Yeah, that's a good one. Free agent after next year. If you're Detroit, are you going to be willing to pay him the $300 to $400 million it's going to take to? And I don't think they're going to be. I really don't. And I don't think they're getting any kind of discount from Skubal. I think he's going to go out on the market and do his thing, right? And get his money. But I think if you're Detroit, you treat it like this. You do what you can to build a World Series team. And if at the deadline you're not in a great spot, you consider trading him. If you're in a really, really bad spot where there's basically no chance you go anywhere, you trade him and get what you can. Otherwise, be okay with taking all your shots with Skubal and saying goodbye at the end of the year. You make your pitch, but yeah, I think if you have a chance to win, you can't give that up to trade Skubal at the deadline. And there are not a lot of scenarios. I won't say zero, but there are not a lot of scenarios where you trade Skubal at the deadline and your team is still good enough to stay in it. Skubal's not trading Suarez and Naylor and the Diamondbacks staying in the race till the end of the year. That's a little bit of a different, equation there. But I think that's probably what you do in Detroit. I just can't see them spending that kind of money to keep Skubal in town.
All right. So yeah, there's gonna be people that think this is bad luck, but I'm curious anyway. I want to know if the Mariners manage to get to the World Series, and odds are at this point that they will. Who's the better matchup? And is it a significant difference between one of the Brewers and the Dodgers?
I think from a pure talent standpoint, there is a noticeable difference between the Dodgers and everybody else in baseball. We see the Yamamotos and the Otanis and the Freddie Freemans and the Mookie Betts. When it comes to performance, LA's still up there. It's the best roster in baseball. They haven't always been healthy, but when they're good, and Blake Snell is good right now, Yamamoto's good right now, the Dodgers are the best team on paper. Paper doesn't win you championships, of course, but so I think if you're Seattle, you look at that Milwaukee team, you look at their strengths, you look at their weaknesses. That's a team who they don't actually hit a lot of home runs. They hit fewer home runs than the Blue Jays did. But they steal a lot of bases. Is that something you want to deal with? You want to deal with a lot of stolen bases and that sort of thing? Or do you want to deal with the power of the Dodgers where they can explode for 7 runs in 2 innings? I think if you're Seattle, you probably want the Brewers. You stay away from those number one type starters. Freddie Peralta's pretty good, but he's not Yamamoto or Blake Snell. We saw Snell deal yesterday and look really, really good. Obviously, the local kid out of Shoreline High School. I mean, I saw that kid when he was 130 pounds and 6'3" and had a 61-mile-an-hour curveball. And I was asking scouts, "And that curveball a little slow?" And he goes, "For now." That's how long that kid's kind of been in our head here in Seattle. That'd be fun to face him though. But I think if you're Seattle, you probably want the Brewers. But if you're a Mariners fan, do you really care at the end of the day? No. Win 2 more games. And I started off the live show on baseball things last night after the game was over with 2 more wins. You were two wins away. That's it. And I kept repeating myself until everybody in the live chat was saying the same thing. You're 2 wins away. That's what the Mariners are certainly focused on, and I'm sure fans are focused on that too. But it's impossible to look ahead, to not look ahead. It's impossible not to think about a potential World Series matchup. It's impossible not to think, like you were just talking about, thinking about next year, thinking about what they might be able to do in the offseason, how exciting that is. Does Polanco come back? Do they get Naylor back? And if not Naylor, who plays first base? Like those things are always there. But thinking about the Brewer, I think you saw in game 1 of the NLCS, Brian, the difference between those two teams is how easy it was for the Dodgers to get their 2 runs and how difficult it was for the Brewers to get their 1. And that's not necessarily the case in every game with the Dodgers, but Yamamoto can shut you down, Snell can shut you down, and they're all about the strikeout. Like both of those guys are Logan Gilbert when he's at his best. George Kirby, against the Angels, this year a couple of times, absolutely dominating. And that's what those guys are, on a regular basis right now. So I think if you're Seattle, you probably prefer to face the Brewers. And there's so many storylines there too, with the whole pilots thing and the 2 teams in Toronto and Seattle being the class of 1977 in Major League Baseball. So that's fun. I say if you're a Mariners fan, be a Brewers fan, in your spare time, if you got any energy left, to be honest with you, because I try to stay as objective and as neutral as possible, Brian, which, was hard for me to do for a while, but now I'm just like right in the middle. And it's hard for me not to get through the game and go, I'm exhausted. Like I am exhausted watching these games, sitting on the edge of every seat I walk around and sit on in the house. So if you have any energy left, maybe you're Brewers fans at this point.
Yeah, the phrase I've been using is tired and wired. Somehow both at the same
that's
time.
good. That's good. Yeah. I like
That's
that.
how it feels.
Yeah.
That's how it feels. And so, the Blue Jays come in these next 3 games in T-Mobile, and Mariners hope that it's 2 games. Blue Jays hope it's at least all 3. Um, what do you think has to happen for the Mariners to keep winning, and what has to happen for the Blue Jays to turn this around?
I think the early runs are big for Seattle. You could probably say that for a lot of teams, but I think it might be more important for Seattle because it kind of gets them off this, like the pressure doesn't build up. The intensity, you're down 1-0, you just can't brew it, and it's the 5th inning. Frustration can't be, like, we can't quantify frustration in sports, but it's not 0, right? You're 0 for 2, and you're like, you missed a middle fastball, or you took one. I mean, Julio had that day in game 2. Middle fastball right there. Those kinds of things happen, and it certainly can get into hitters' heads, and I always hear the term pressing. I think guys are trying to hit home runs every single time up anyway, but frustration, even though it can't be measured, is real. And when you get to the 5th inning, the 6th inning, you're like, we should be killing this guy. There's going to be frustration. So I think it's really important that they score a run or 2 early, even if you don't have the lead, to kind of get away from that and be like, okay, this is what we did in the 2nd inning. Let's keep doing this to kind of build some sort of a path to scoring more runs. But it's a pretty long lineup, generally until, Dom Canzone gets pinch hit for in the 2nd inning. And then they turn it into a Garver kind of Rivas Raley sort of thing, which you can't really expect to get a lot of offense out of. Rivas has had his moment. Garver's triple was my favorite thing about game 2, by the way.
Unbelievable.
That was awesome. And the smile on his face was absolutely magic. The
awesome.
magic of baseball there. I think that's the key. It's still the same formula, though. It's still be even or ahead when your starter and their starter is out of the game for Seattle. If it's 1-0 or 7-2 or 7, it doesn't even matter. It doesn't even matter if you pitched well to get there. You have the lead. You have the advantage. That's where Seattle's at against the Toronto Blue Jays. Maybe that's different against the Brewers or the Dodgers, but it was like that with the Tigers, and it's certainly like that with the Toronto Blue Jays as well. Their weakness is, overall, their weakness is the bullpen, but it's really those middle guys. If their starter can't get them like through 6, bridge them to their best 2 relievers, particularly Jeff Hoffman, they're at a disadvantage. So getting a run or 2 early tends to go a long way in how you deal with the rest of the game, and how these players can kind of relax and be loose and go out there and perform.
So I gotta say, Jason, like, Blue Jays fans are gonna be like, "Oh man, the Mariners, they're hitting on all cylinders. They're playing really well. Tough time to face them." I don't feel like they're hitting on all cylinders. Like, Randy Rosarina, Gino Suarez, they ain't hitting on all cylinders. Even Julio. This is not hot Julio. It's not terrible Julio, but it's somewhere like okay. What do you see the chances are that, like, Randy and Gino can start contributing in more meaningful ways?
Yeah, those kind of things turn on a dime too. I don't know if this like this in football, but those things just sometimes it's just one day they're like 2 for 37, and all of a sudden they're 8 for their next 18 with 3 bombs. And but I think the important thing is not those numbers, not what is Suarez the rest of the way. Because if Suarez goes 3 for the rest of the series, but 2 of them are like, 2-run homers or a bases loaded double to give you a 3-run lead in the 5th inning of game 3 or something, nobody's going to remember. So it's the timing of it and being able to kind of be yourself in those tight moments. Those are the things that everybody looks at Polanco in the division series. What, he hit a $182 in that series? Nobody's thinking about Polanco hitting a $182 in the LDS because he had the 2 big home runs against Skubal and had the game winner, in the 15-inning marathon. Nobody really thinks Polanco struggled in that series because really he didn't, and his hits just came in the right spots. And I think if there was an MVP for that, I think a lot of people probably would have said, hey, Jorge Polanco might be the guy in that series. So I think that's how you look at Arozarena. I think that's how you look at Suarez and really anybody else in that lineup. JP, do they get their hits? Do they get enough of their hits? Do they move runners along? Do they get the sac flies? Do they get the bunt down? Things like that. Do they work counts? There's a lot of value in those things. You've seen those ump scorecards, right? where it gives like a plus or minus runs per team.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the win probability is a big thing. And if you look at it from a win probability standpoint, a 6-pitch at bat, an 8-pitch at bat has a lot more value than swinging at the first pitch and popping up when there's a runner on second base, right? Work that count, get that guy out of there or get him tired. We're in the postseason. These guys are pitching almost every night. So maybe Suarez can do something like that. And we've seen some at bats like that with Suarez in this series so far. Detroit, not so much, but again,
that's part of why I asked. And sorry to jump in there. I thought I saw better swings from Gino Suarez on, like he was seeing the ball better. You know, he got the one double, almost home run in that series in the first 2 games, but at least they weren't just. He looked like he was flailing at times.
He was under or behind or both just about every fastball in the Detroit series.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's really hard to make an adjustment like that on the fly, but maybe between series, you know, he did. At least he was getting a piece of some of those fastballs, you know, in the Toronto series so far. Obviously the double, which maybe should have been another triple, by the way.
Yeah,
maybe Garver was watching that and thought, hey, I'm going to hit, but I'm going to take off. But Suarez is kind of one of those secondary pieces in that lineup, considering where he's hitting, you know, 5, 6, 7, right there, usually behind Naylor or ahead of Naylor against a lefty starter, which Toronto doesn't have. So he's important. But, you know, I've talked about too, like a Rosarena being the leadoff hitter, and folks are like, man, do you make a change there? And it's like, I don't really know who else you would put there. Like maybe Polanco. But think about how valuable Polanco has been with all those runners on base. Do you really want that to be a Rosarena because you want somebody better leading off and getting that one extra bat in the whole series? Because that's the difference between batting first and fourth or fifth in a 7-game series is maybe one total at bat. I think you just leave it alone, you know, and just hope those guys.
I'm with you on that. It's funny you say that because I haven't really thought twice about him being at the top of the order, because if I'm a pitcher, that is a stressful at bat regardless, because he's a guy that's not just gonna, if he hits it, chances are he's going to do damage. He's not JP Crawford, where you're generally feeling like, okay, the worst thing this guy's going to do is hit a double, you know, like right. Generally speaking. And so, and if he does get on base, he's going to cause problems for me. So I agree with you there. He seems like I don't quite see where the turnaround is going to be for him, but hopefully it comes. And they haven't gotten anything from Dom Canzone yet, which, you know,
his 9 plate appearances in the postseason, though.
They've been taking him out
for him. Yeah.
Very quickly. I've been saying to anyone that will listen, like, I feel like that guy is going to be one of the guys that has a big moment in the postseason. Hasn't happened yet. I still believe that that's a guy that you want in that.
I'm a Canzone fan too. I mean, somebody asked me about Canzone back in like May. Is he just going to be, and he was down in AAA, and I was like, yeah, he's probably just going to be this up and down guy. And then he makes this adjustment, and here we are. Like, he's on the postseason roster and belongs in the lineup. So I'm with you there. I think Canzone is going to have a shot at least at some point in this postseason to hit one in the gap with runners on, hit the ball out of the ballpark, you know, something along those lines. But I mean, we've already seen, you know, unsung heroes be the heroes, you know, the Rebos of the world, and Bazardo has been huge, and that's just what happens in these short series.
Well, perfect timing, because we got a super chat here. What has led to Bazardo's turnaround this season? How would you describe that?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, we're seeing a little bit more consistent top end velocity from him and real confidence in his 2-seamer. Like, he's a guy who just naturally has that kind of wrist action, that kind of release where the 2-seamer is his pitch. Anybody can throw a 4-seamer, but it might be straight. So you got to find something to stay away from the barrel. And he was throwing a ton of sliders last year, not throwing that 2-seamer. Now he's throwing that 2-seamer and locating that 2-seamer, you know, away from right-handed batters.
Yes.
It's something righties do tend to struggle with. You either try to find some sort of cutter to get out there or some sort of hard slider you can locate, but throwing a 4-seamer away there, that's dangerous. But you throw a 2-seamer, it actually starts off the plate. And Bazardo has done a really good job doing that. Brian Wu can do that a little bit as well. Kirby can do that. But that's what Bazardo's done, and that it's one of the better 2-seamers. And you see it listed as a sinker. StatCast thinks every 2-seamer is a sinker, but it doesn't really sink that much, right? It's really just back into the right-handed hitter, you know, or away from a lefty. But he'll throw that inside to lefties too and work it back into the strike zone. It's been an absolute huge pitch for him. It's one of the best 2-seamers by a reliever in all of Major League Baseball since August 1st. that's really been it. The confidence in being able to locate 95 plus with that two-seamer, and it's not straight. When you throw a straight fastball, it doesn't matter where you throw it, how hard you throw, it's going to get hit. It's not straight. So that's really been it for Bazardo.
I think you're so spot on with the location part because his stuff always seemed plus, but there were times where he just couldn't get it over the plate, or he got it all over the plate. And
Yeah,
it was like
too much of the plate.
too much of the plate. And it was just like, all right, dude, this is, if you're down 7 runs, that's the guy I want to see. Otherwise, don't want to see this guy in the ball game. I can't remember, at least in my time, I've watched a lot of Mariners games for a lot of years. I can't remember a player that went from such an extreme of Bobby Ayala bad to this good in such short order, or ever, like just generally, like
usually they get here and it's something the team did in spring training and they're pretty good right away, like Gabe Spire, right?
Yeah.
And he struggled last year because he was hurt, but first year with Gabe Spire, he was like good right away. We didn't see him pitch a whole season where he was like mediocre or bad and then all of a sudden flip the switch. But it certainly worked that way with Bazardo. And there's always that thing about grabbing a reliever, getting rid of a reliever too soon. Like this year, they had Drew Pomeranz, and then they let him go and he goes to Chicago and ends up being one of their best relievers all year. Certainly could have used him. It happens so often with so many clubs. But the one thing that Jerry Dipoto has proven is that they'll figure it out with the bullpen. They've always been able to figure it out with the bullpen. Have a good bullpen, a good solid bullpen, sometimes a great bullpen. And they wanted to go get, Duran from the Twins.
Man, it would be nice that it happened.
I'll tell you what, if anybody's wondering out there what happened there? Why couldn't they? The Phillies wanted, the Twins wanted major league ready, like right now today, pitching. The Phillies had Mick Abel. They had Mick Abel to spare because they also have Andrew Painter major league ready, and the catcher. And they got the catcher and they got the major league ready starter, and they would rather have that than have 4 Mariners prospects. If you ask me, the Twins made a mistake there.
Yeah.
And Seattle just couldn't keep throwing value, onto the pile to convince the Twins to do it. So it didn't work out. We'll see, how that works out for the Twins, but I think they made a mistake. I like the Mariners package on that significantly better than the Phillies package, but they tried, but they always figure out the bullpen. They always, from a roster standpoint, they always figure out something. And Bazardo stepping up and particularly against righties, he's very, very tough, but I think he's earned his keep against lefties these days too.
Jason, this has been such a blast, man. I've got a perma grin on. Tell folks where they can find all your stuff and what's coming up on Prospect Insider and Baseball Things.
At this point, the podcast at Baseball Things is just post-game live. There's game, day off, game, day off, game. So we're just doing, as soon as the game is over, we're going live. Find me over at Patreon. Obviously, I'm at on X at Prospect Insider, and I write series previews during the postseason over at midnightmariners.com. But the podcast is the focus at this point, and people are having a lot of fun with the post-game stuff because, when the Mariners win, it's fun, right?
It is fun, isn't it? Man, Jason, thank you so much. And everyone, make sure you check out Jason Churchill over at Prospect Insider. We'll do this again sometime. Thank you, Jason.
Hey, appreciate it, man. I love what you do here.
All right, take care. All right, that is Jason Churchill, Prospect Insider. And folks, if you have not already, head over to simplyseattle.com. Use code HawkBlogger15. Get 15% off all the Mariners gear you want, Seahawks gear you want, any Seattle sports gear, 15% off. And also, download the Sleeper app. Use my code Hawks. Use my code Hawks. You get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 25 states. Check out Sleeper today. Last but not least, make sure you go to jkboots.com/hawkblogger and get great deal on the best boots you're ever going to own. I love my JK boots, made in Spokane, handmade, takes some weeks to do it. And you can get a great deal at jkboots.com/hawkblogger. All right, folks, I'm going to go talk Seahawks now. Come over to the Seahawks Collective. I'll be there with Annabelle Hasselback, Mike Shandugar, and Rob Staten. See you over there on that channel. And tomorrow morning, I'll be back with HB Mornings with DJ. I can't remember his last name. It's Bien, something Bien. Anyway, he works for ESPN and he covers the Texans. we'll get into all that tomorrow morning. So see you then. Take care.